I'll explain intentionality and inspiration, because when I told friends that that was the title of my talk, I can't tell you how many people said to me, intentionality, that's not a word. And I thought that I had made it up, but I was happy to see that it is on the internet, it is a word, and I'll tell you what I mean by intentionality. And the other night I was reading a book by a color philosopher, and there was a whole discourse on intentionality, so I was very happy about that. Then what I'll do is I brought a few of my recent paintings, and I'll just go over some of the color concepts. And I'm going to keep it to color. I'm not going to really get too much into composition and drawing because we'd be here for forever. So I'm just focusing on color today. So I'll talk about some of the color concepts that I used in making these paintings. Then I'll talk about the color wheel. I'm sure you all know a lot about the color wheel, but I'll just review the basics and how it can really help you. And I refer to the color wheel every day when I'm painting. And it's just a good thing to have in your bag of tricks. Then color mixing. This is the original painting for the color mixing guide. And I'll talk about why I created it and how you can use it and how it can help you. And talking about how to mix grays and neutral colors. Then I'll talk about color palettes. Also color mixing, and have you ever heard of split primary color mixing? Okay, well that's a really great way to mix clean, bright, strong colors, so I'll explain that to you. And also other options for setting up your palette, for bright colors or old master colors, earthy colors. You can really determine the outcome of your painting by the colors that you work with. And it's all do what I say, not what I do, because, when I get into the studio in the morning, I'm so excited to start painting. I just take out a tube of red and start, but you really should set up your palette with all of the colors so that even if you're working with reds, if you want to tone it down a little bit or gray it or make it lighter or warmer or cooler, it's good to have a little bit of all of the colors there so that you can fine tune without having to dig through your paint box looking for a green right in the middle of your inspiration. Then I'm going to talk about the color contrasts. And it was actually developed by a French philosopher, I think back in the 1700s, Chevreul. But there's a great book by Johann Iten, and he talks about the 7 color contrasts. And they're things like, well, I'll get into it later, but they're great ways to help you put some logic and thought and just to help you know how to approach a painting depending on what kind of effect you want to have. And then finally, any questions and answers. And if any of you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask or just jot it down and we can talk about it later. Okay, so intentionality. Okay, intentionality is, in my mind anyway, it's like knowledge. It's knowing, it's having an idea or a concept. It's sort of knowing what you want. Like with this painting, I knew that I wanted red and green. That was my intentionality. I could see it in my mind. And intentionality is also it's really having an idea or a starting point. It's also knowledge. It's knowing the color wheel and reading books and studying art history and studying the artists that you love. It's in my mind, it's about knowledge. It's about being intentional. The example that I read on the internet was that in your mind, if you're thinking about a cat, okay, it can be a specific cat. It could be your cat, Spanky, or it could just be the idea of a cat. but the cat exists, whether it's real or just an idea. But you're being intentional about a cat. You're thinking about a cat. So it's like the more knowledge you have about painting, the more it will help you. So be intentional. It helps if when you start a painting, start with an idea or a concept or a feeling or something that gets you exciting. And then, of course, inspiration is the urge to be creative. It's when you're painting and everything's going really well and you're happy and you love it, then forget all your knowledge. You don't need any of that. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is inspiration. But even when I'm painting, if I get stuck or if the colors aren't quite working, I'll go back and refer to the color wheel, or I'll look at paintings by Kandinsky or de Kooning, for inspiration and just to use my mind. So it's sort of using your feelings and using your mind. Those are the two elements of intentionality and inspiration. Okay, the paintings. Let's see. We'll start with this one. This I call Taming the Dragon. And it started with a very small black and white print of a tiny little section from a de Kooning painting. And what I loved about it, it just, when I looked at this, and it was really nothing, it was just splotches of black and white, but I saw sort of a rolling river. And suddenly this little black and white image that was nothing transported me to a jungle. It was a jungle, and I was in the thicket, and there was a rolling river, but I didn't know what colors I wanted to use. And then I was flipping through a magazine, and I saw an article about the Duchess of Windsor's jewels, and there was a picture of an emerald and a ruby. And it just got me so excited. So that was the inspiration for this. And this is really, when I talk about complementary colors, the red and the green are exact complements. They're at opposite sides of the color wheel, so they balance each other well. So this is really a study of complements. It's also modulation, where the cubists used modulation a lot, and that's a very effective tool, where you take a shape from light to dark. And if you go from light to dark, it helps bring the viewer into the picture plane, because your eye follows the transition. And transitions, there are three main types of transitions, which I'll get into later, but there's light to dark, cool to warm, or bright to dull. And that's a very effective way of helping carry the eye into the canvas. And it's also a good way if you mix it up to give a painting rhythm and energy. Okay, so what else? Okay, let's see. So that's Taming the Dragon. This is an earlier painting. I painted this about 8 years ago. And I was very intentional with this. I decided I wanted to create a color plane that basically went from light to dark. And I started with, and I also wanted to keep it very blue. Blue colors with little bits of its complement orange. Okay, so I was very intentional, but I tend to be very precise, so to keep myself from being too precise, I threw some paint on it, and so I generally followed, the lines, so that helped give me some motion. So this is really all about value, going from light to dark. They're analogous colors. Analogous means they're very close to each other on the color wheel. Blues and purples. And when you use analogous colors, that helps create atmosphere, because there's a unity. They're all connected. It's like if you look at the world through rose-colored glasses, you're seeing everything sort of under an atmosphere. So it's analogous colors are a very good tool, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later also. And then with just the little bits of of orange. And that's one of the color contrasts called size. You can have a lot of something and then a little of something. And that's a great way to get a little activity and excitement into a painting. Like if you want to change a green to a yellow, acrylic will cover it quickly. It dries faster, so you can cover it sooner. But oils, you can push around more. Okay, so this painting is really, if you think about what elements of painting did I use here, this is, again, very much about modulation and about value. You know, going from dark to light, dark to light, dark to light, also dull to bright. You know, it's all about modulation, and it creates the planes that carry you into the painting. And also the straight lines, that's a new thing that I've been experimenting with lately. I'm always trying something different. You know, I don't stick with one thing because I love to experiment and learn, and I'm a student of color, and I'm really only interested in color. I've always only been interested in color. And light travels in a straight line, yes. And friends say, Dee, you're crazy, you know, splash it afterwards. But the reason I like to do it, first of all, I use a very small brush. You know, I'm very precise. And the splashes helped determine the flow of the color. So I like to work around it so that the splashes are incorporated into the painting. But you could splash after or in between. You know, that's the fun thing about art. There are no rules. You can do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. This was a study. I must say I spent years studying Kandinsky because I love his freedom and his colors, and also the fact that he's basically non-representational. I also this one was more inspired by de Kooning, you know, with the scraping and the gestures. So it's good. Pick some artists that you love, that really inspire you, and study them, copy them even, because, you know, back in Paris in the 1900s, Matisse, probably Picasso even, Monet, Manet, they were all in the Louvre copying paintings. You know, it's a language, and it's a language that gets passed on. And the best way to learn is to pick some artists that you love and learn from them. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, even if you just do little sketches. Really get to study the painters that really speak to you. Yeah, but the challenge for me when I'm looking at a painting is trying to figure out, how did they do this? Where did they start? Which color came first? Right. And it's a process. But as you, let's say if you keep working with Van Gogh's paintings, you start to get to know him a little bit better. You really get to know them intimately when you copy their paintings. He was really crazy. Yeah, he was great. Circles. Yeah, yes?
This is an aside. How long did it take you to do that painting?
What, this one?
Yeah.
They take me about a month. Yeah, I'm trying to work faster now. I'm a little better now. I'm maybe a week. And it's also a value contrast, a lot of lights and darks juxtaposed against each other, so it's very lively.